So the title of this talk tonight is Anxiety and Mindfulness of the Body. And as most of you know by now, this is my very first Dharma talk. So I'm going to spend a few moments now as we begin checking in with my own experience in my body right now. And I'll invite all of us to maybe take a moment as well to check in with this body and this moment. I'm going to narrate a bit about my experience, and as I name different parts of the body, we might all check in with those areas. So, unsurprisingly, I'm noticing anxiety in my body. And a good next question is, what does anxiety feel like for me? So, for me, it's like a fluttering in my torso. There's a sense that my right leg is kind of clenched up into my hip joint. My shoulder blades feel tightened to my midline, and my lower back is not completely happy either. For me, in this moment, this is mindfulness of my body. We all probably found different things in our bodies, different patterns, perhaps nothing at all, and that's also okay. My body right now feels uncomfortable and tight. And yet, for me, there's a deep settling and turning towards my body at these moments. As Sharon often says, oh, it's like this now. So, narrating this experience of my body and a fair degree of discomfort for many of us could be off putting. And some of us here tonight might ask a very great question: why would I want to turn towards that? Why would I want to put attention towards a body that's suffering? And truly, I can say that that's a very valid response. I somewhat support that response. Turning towards my body has been one of the most difficult acts I have ever undertaken in my life, and also one of the most rewarding. As Sharon said earlier, I am going through a training program in the Alexander Technique, which really is a method of paying deep and curious attention to our bodies. And so I've had a lot of support in my journey towards turning towards this body. I recommend that we all have a lot of support, go slowly, very kindly with these bodies. They are miracles of a sort. So I'd like to start off tonight with one of the foundational suttas of the Buddhist canon. Some of us might know it already. It's called the Satipatthana Sutta, also known as the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. And I'm not going to go through all of the foundations, but what I do think is significant is that the Buddha lists mindfulness of the body as the first foundation. And he gives it a good deal of space, time and space. He outlines 6 different ways, avenues, through which we can become better acquainted with our bodies. Some of these instructions from the sutta are commonplace to those of us with some meditation experience. I'm going to lead us briefly through one, if you're willing. Breathing in long, I know I breathe in long. Breathing out long, I know I breathe out long. Breathing in long, I know I breathe in long. Breathing out long, I know I breathe out long. So the breath is a common anchor for those of us who practice meditation. In the Western context, we spend a lot of time with the breath. And that really is great. The breath is fantastic, can help us in moments of anxiety, can help us right now to become more present. There are other avenues that the Buddha discusses in this sutta that are less well known and definitely less explored in the Western context. So there's one in which the Buddha guides us to contemplate various body parts, including our bowels, our mesentery, and our feces. So don't worry, we're not going to go there tonight. But where we are going is hopefully a more rich and full understanding of how these bodies can be our most staunch allies in the realm of spiritual practice. Also an ally in these pretty anxiety-inducing times. I have some questions that I'm going to address and explore together tonight. So one of them is, why does the Buddha reference the body first in his teachings on mindfulness? Is that on purpose? I'm guessing it was. But why? So we'll look into that. And then a related question is, have human beings always had such difficulty turning towards our day-to-day experiences of our bodies, staying with our bodies moment to moment? Or is that more of a modern phenomenon with the generation of smartphones or all of us looking at laptops right now? I tend to think it might be part of the human condition, but I'm going to leave that up to all of us to draw our own conclusions. It's an interesting question, I think, to explore. So one more sutta as we move through this investigation. This is called the Chapana Sutta, and I'm going to recount it briefly. It offers a really vivid metaphor that might help us to understand a bit about mindfulness of the body in the Buddhist context. So the sutta begins with 6 wild animals. There's a snake, a hyena, a crocodile, a monkey, a bird, and a dog. And the metaphor is that each of these 6 wild animals represents one of our 6 sense organs. There's the common 5 that we know of in the Western context: sight, smell, taste, sound, and touch. And then Buddhist thought introduces intellect as a 6th. So these 6 wild animals are all tied together with a really strong rope. As you can imagine, they're not pleased about that. And they're struggling each to their own habitat. The crocodile wants to go to the river, and the hyena wants to go wherever hyenas go. And they become tied to this sturdy wooden post. So initially, they don't understand that this post is so sturdy, and they struggle. They struggle and struggle, and eventually they realize that all this struggling is in vain. And they submit to the strength, the sturdiness of this wooden post. As you might have guessed, or can guess, The sturdy wooden post is a metaphor for our capacity to develop mindfulness of the body. The wild animals of our senses struggle and struggle. They chase stimuli all around us in the news, our hearing, our sight, our smell. But eventually, if we have some capacity of mindfulness of the body established, the wild animals of our senses might stop some of their struggle. They submit, they lie down, and they stop bothering us all that much. As someone who has struggled with pretty high levels of anxiety my whole life, the promises of developing a more sturdy mindfulness of my own body has been a truly powerful gift. So many times in my life, thousands, probably millions of times, a thought comes to my mind, usually of the future and catastrophe, and I get pulled away from my current experience, pulled away from myself and the present moment. Cultivating the skill of staying with my body, or at least noticing when I'm very far away from my body, has been transformative for me. So that's the sense organs. Their habitual pull over us is strong. But it's not the only factor in our ability or lack of ability to turn towards and stay with our body's experience. I'm going to move now into a description of a paradox of our bodies, a very real paradox that our bodies present us. So, whether or not we have consciously thought of this, deep down there's likely to be some kind of knowledge that our bodies are the platform where we confront our own impermanence, the fact that we won't be here forever. It's where we confront our lack of control over life. So, to illustrate this paradox, I'm going to show you something that's kind of commonplace, but I think interesting. So, some of the time I'm in control of this body right here. So, right now I'm deciding I would like to raise a hand. So, there, raise my right hand. It looks easy, but it actually took us several years to figure that out when we were quite young. Also, we can take walks these days to kind of calm us down. After 33 years of some walking, I can walk okay. So, I decide to take a walk and I go do that, no problem. But other times, and more often than we care to admit, our bodies do not follow our wishes or desires. Then somewhat often our bodies are not under our conscious control at all. I know that there are those among us tonight who have dealt with or are dealing with cancer, chronic illness, chronic pain. These bodies of ours, they fall prey to so many dangers, not least of which is this virus that has us all in quarantine at this very moment. So these bodies are very fragile. They're very vulnerable to infection and disease and disability, but also to more minor discomforts, like I got a rock in my shoe on that walk, or I ate too much granola, so my jaw gets tired. Or there's a lot of dry skin between my fingers because I've been washing my hands a lot. Just like the mind cycles endlessly through pleasant and unpleasant thoughts, this body also cycles endlessly through pleasant and unpleasant sensations, conditions, and experiences. The natural state of this body is not complete comfort and ease. This body at base is naturally a somewhat uncomfortable place to be. So I'd like us all to take another moment, if you're willing, to notice how our bodies, notice how our minds are sitting with that reminder of our fragility, our own impermanence of this unit. The fragility of this body is not an easy thing to contemplate. It's not supposed to be an easy thing to contemplate. And yet, this contemplation can be central to our practice. It is central to our lives, whether we face that or not. But to continue on with this paradox, we can also remember that along with this innate vulnerability of this body, somehow simultaneously, these bodies of ours are wise, wise beyond anything the conscious mind can truly grasp. Our bodies hold the remnants of every soul destroying act we have ever witnessed, participated in, or been subjected to. Our bodies also hold every crumb of goodwill, love, and nourishment that we've ever witnessed, participated in, or been blessed with. These bodies know things very deeply. They know the darkest corners of ourselves sometimes better than our conscious minds do. And the best part is, there is a best part, our bodies are constantly trying to communicate this knowledge and wisdom with us, to us, in ways we can understand. So I'm going to spend the rest of the talk delving into that question. How do they speak to us? What is this language? And it's different for all of us, which is kind of why it's so fun. It's a unique and shared experience. For those of us with some meditation experience, the instructions, what do you feel in your body? How do you feel in your body? Where do you feel in your body? This might sound familiar. And sometimes they're presented to us like we should just know, that it's self-apparent to all of us. But it's not usually. It's a skill. It's a skill that we're cultivating, this ability to listen and interpret and be with our bodies. So bodies speak in many ways. I'm going to list some that I'm familiar with. They speak in terms of a felt sense of expansion and a felt sense of contraction. They speak in terms of ease and tension. They speak in terms of temperature, a rush of heat, cold hands or feet. They speak in terms of muscle twitches, spasms in our back. They speak in terms of cohesiveness. But more importantly, and I really want to emphasize this, bodies speak in terms of numbness and disconnection. If we tune into our bodies as a whole or a part of our body and we don't feel anything, that's a noticing, a very important noticing. And as a student of Buddhism, we might remember that everything changes. So it might behoove us to check back in with that part of the body. Things do change. The body is always changing. So there's also the next set of things I'm going to list are perhaps seemingly inconsequential, but I don't think I'd be mentioning them if they were truly. So all of us have been at home a lot, cooking maybe more than usual. As we're standing in front of the stove, watching a pot of water boil or doing some dishes, there's so much to notice with our bodies there. How much weight is each leg? receiving into the ground? Is one hip slung to the side? Do we have to wash all the dishes using our right hand to hold the sponge? If we are reading the news or reading a book, we might notice that our head is a little cocked to the side. That might mean that one of our eyes is dominant over the other. That could be interesting to notice. We might go for that walk and notice that a hip tires out more quickly than the other, or a shoulder if we're doing a lot of gardening work. We might notice how we clasp our hands together. There's usually a way that feels normal and then a way that feels really odd. We might notice how we roll out of bed. We do that really interestingly, usually. And then driving. Our bodies do such weird things while we're driving. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of stimulus there. So why am I bringing all these little things up? It's my opinion that each of these bits of knowledge we have noticed about our bodies truly matters because they keep us in the present moment. They tether us to now, which is really the only place that this body ever lives. The more that we take time to notice this body, take time to notice how much there really is to notice, it can become evident to us that the ways that we think of ourselves in this world, how we love, what we believe in, how we act, are really inseparable from the way that this body is, the way that it shows itself. For me, I found that the way I hold a writing utensil, a pencil or a pen, is oftentimes the way that I love the world, the way that I love other people. I often have a vice grip on my pencil, and I think the same can be said for my attachment to people, to this life. I don't want it to run away. So in Buddhism, we often hear that we should bring mindfulness to our daily tasks. There's some quotes about bringing mindfulness to eating, drinking, chewing, savoring, in walking and standing and sitting and falling asleep and waking and speaking and in keeping silence. Whenever I hear a list like that, I hear a pretty heavy dose of should. I should be mindful all the time. Of course, I'm not. So, that's not great. And so, something that has worked really well for me, just in life in general, is to bring in some curiosity and some playfulness to this inquiry around mindfulness of our own bodies. I tend to eat my breakfast really fast. That's just how that goes for me. So, yeah, I'm mindful of how fast I'm eating my breakfast. But there's so many other things that I could also be curious about. Sometimes I can notice, oh, I think I'm chewing more on the right side of my mouth than on the left side. Or has anyone ever paid attention to how swallowing works? That's kind of very interesting. Yeah, pretty important too. For walking, as I mentioned earlier, I think walking is really just an amazing thing that we're able to do. We learned it for several years when we were younger, and just because we don't remember that, I think we tend to take it for granted, but it took us quite a while to learn how to walk with any skill. And there's so much to notice about walking. Some of us walk with our eyes facing more of the horizon. Some of us walk with our gaze downward. How does that feel if we change where our gaze is as we're walking? There's also kind of the spiralic movement of walking. Do our arms swing? Should they swing? What is that all about? And also the feet. How do the feet hit the ground? There's worlds to really discover in the smallest of movements. So I'm going to end tonight with one more note that I found really meaningful to keep in mind. So many of us have spent a lot of time watching the mind, noticing how the mind works. And we might have noticed that the mind really likes certainty. The mind likes to make sense of things, tends to like rational conclusions. Our bodies, however, tend to work according to a different set of often invisible patterns and tendencies. There really is so much cohesive beauty in the workings of these bodies, but, and this is a big but, the intellectual mind will likely never be able to fully grasp how the body manifests, how the body makes meaning. So I have some questions to kind of leave us with. Is it possible for us to keep paying attention to these bodies in the face of knowing that we will never fully understand them? Can we maintain some level of affection and admiration for these bodies as they work their magic, and it really is magic, in processing and assimilating an entire lifetime's worth of joy and sorrow? Some of us here tonight, not all of us, but some of us are blessed right now with an abundance of free time. Even those of us who are not blessed with free time, our bodies are here with us right now on this journey. They might tighten up, breathe less fully as we read the news, find out that quarantine might last who knows how long. They might become more rigid and numb as we venture out to the grocery store and witness how much our world keeps changing. What would it be like to sense into our body's experience of all of this as we're walking into the grocery store, as we're reading the news? And what would it be like to stay with our body's experience of all this? I like to envision that sturdy wooden post from the Suta's metaphor, how that sturdy wooden post holds fast against these wild animals of our senses, against that wild animal of our anxiety. That anxiety taking us into a future that is not right now. So I'm going to close with some words from the late Mary Oliver. This is an excerpt from her poem called Evidence. As for the body, it is solid and strong and curious and full of detail. It wants to polish itself. It wants to love another body. It is the only vessel in the world that can hold, in a mix of power and sweetness, words, song, gesture, passion, ideas, ingenuity, devotion, merriment, vanity, and virtue. Keep some room in your heart for the unimaginable. Thank you all for your kind attention. I appreciate you all.